This is Gary Atensi with CNTV, and today we're in Colorado. I am here with the founder of Botdorf Research. Since 2016, they have been delivering world-class research using a combination of traditional research methods combined with the latest in data mining technology. I'm joined with the founder, five-time managing partner and author, John Botdorf. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Gary. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and I'm looking forward to the interview, so feel free to ask me whatever you like.
Let's start off a little bit about yourself. You were formerly educated at California State University, where you went on to receive a master's at Grand Canyon University. Your experience as a managing partner really in multiple companies throughout the years has led you to focusing on next generation technologies. Share with me a little bit how this passion for collecting information and sharing your findings all started.
Well, that's a great question, Gary. I started out, I say this is my third career. I started out working for family offices in Colorado and California, buying them large institutional real estate like shopping malls and industrial parks and whatnot. And after about a 10, 12-year stint on that, I had some overlapping duties that went another 3 years because you can't just leave when you're in the middle of many projects like the 400 acres in Parker. So I started my own companies. I had a cellular company. I sold it off to GTE. I bought a company up in Canada that made booster packs, basically batteries to help jumpstart your car. And then I went on to do a high-tech deal in Arizona that made chemical, mechanical planarization machines. Those are machines that make computer chips. And that started my transition into high-tech because it was an enormous research effort. I started managing some money. We seeded into the company. It went public. We all did very well. And then I found myself saying, well, what's going to be my next challenge? So I went on to co-found another software company called 09s. I was executive chairman for 15 years. And toward the end of that, my mother became ill, and I decided it was time after 15 years to focus on her and kind of take care and reintroduce myself to my kids. As a startup founder, it was just absorbing 50, 55, 60-hour weeks for 15 years. It was time for a break. So I took a break. I actually headed out to California. I was also going through a divorce at that time. And when I got to California, I say that's when God put me in a timeout, and I was in a bad accident. And I couldn't walk. I was hospitalized off and on for 2 months. And I thought, now I'm going to really have to start over. We take for granted our health. And so I rented an apartment in Reno for a while, and I took the third floor intentionally so I could focus on rehab, basically walking up and down the stairs. And when I started, it was one floor, and a week later, two, and whatnot. And as I did that, I found myself sitting there looking at Mount Rose in a beautiful new apartment with nothing to do in the sense that I couldn't get out, make deals, do the things I'd been used to doing. And I thought, this is going to drive me crazy. I've got to go somewhere with this. So I enrolled in Grand Canyon University, and I thought, well, I'll get an MBA because I can do that online, even though they've been a physical campus there for since 1942. That kept me busy 3 or 4 hours a day, but now I had 5, 6, 7, 8 hours left. Yeah. So I started writing books. And that's how I couldn't move, so I could still type.
You got 5 hours left. Most people don't do much with 5 days, much less 5 hours. I mean, first of all, deep dive research for private public companies, banks, hedge funds, investors, insurance companies. Let's educate our viewers, first of all, what is deep dive research?
That's another great question. Having worked for 2 billionaires in their family offices, buying them real estate, they don't put up with mistakes.
Okay.
So I knew if I was going to put a green light on $25 or $50 million deal, it's not that my green light was the only one. They could override me. It's their money. But at that time, I didn't want to be wrong. I was young, usually 10 to 15 years younger than the person leaving in the same position.
Wow.
And so I took it upon myself to go way beyond the norm so that it was, quote, in the file, so that I had looked into it. And that meant in real estate, like so many things, has multiple layers to it. What's going on underground? What's going on with easements? What's going on with debt? What's going on with tenants? Are they coming in, going out? Are they doing better? Are they getting worse? You almost want to be able to predict the future of that asset. And to predict the future, you've got to go down deep.
You raised the bar, really, because of your age. You raised the bar and said, I'm going to provide what others don't. I mean, are we kind of in a unique time right now for our country when it comes economically? And does your annual in-depth U.S. economic report, which you probably just released now here at the end of the year, does that kind of provide for us some insights as to maybe what we might expect?
Wow, you've done your homework. That's a report that I put out with my name on it, like any other thing, like a book, and I take a lot of pride in it. We are facing unbelievable challenges as a country right now. And there's one thing I've seen now that I haven't seen ever in 30, 40 years of doing homework. That is, there's a lot of cross currents. To a lot of people right now after COVID, you go to your job, the freeway's open, you buy your groceries, sure you're paying more for them, but we're so much better off than most countries. And in recent months, we're getting a little bit of a Santa Claus rally. But underneath the surface, there's a lot of cross currents that are unprecedented. We have debt that's beyond our capability. Moody's is the last one standing that hasn't downgraded us. And when we get downgraded, if that occurs, we're going to pay a lot more for our debt. We pay a lot more for our debt. There's a lot less money in the pie. We all basically share the pie.
Yeah.
Because after the government writes a check for all the debt, what's left is what we run the country on. So when you start to look at refinancing and rolling 2/3 of that debt over at much higher interest rates, look at what's going on in housing. Last year's report, we predicted a severe decline in housing. We're seeing it now, and this is according to the National Association of Realtors. We're down 15% May to May to 2.4, and the last 2 months we're averaging 1.5. I predicted 30 to 40% off. From the start, the beginning to the end over a 3-year period, we're already at 20% in most markets. Some have not been hit yet, but the denial phase is starting to phase out.
We are in a unique time right now, things that you haven't seen prior. Research and reports, they provide us with insight into what may otherwise be hidden. You yourself have over 2 decades following top secret projects and probably know more about what they are doing than most people, I would say. Is it true that maybe what we don't know can hurt us?
Well, that's a good question. I suppose it would depend on your view of life. It's the same thing when you talk about weapons. Are weapons a deterrence that help avoid war, or do they create more death after they widen? And so a lot of it is to which camp do you wish to subscribe to? Because I can't categorically say that one's significantly better than the other. We're in a very volatile period right now, for sure.
Be it as a partner of Crown Point Center, where you managed really 420-acre real estate project, or as a co-founder of 09's Technology, where you raised over $15 million of capital. In any of your positions you've done in the past, you have always maintained the highest ethical standards. Why is that of really great importance to you?
I think I was raised that way, first of all. I mean, I was an altar boy in 2nd grade, all the way to 8th grade. I moved the annual trip to Disneyland instead of the ocean. That was my legacy, so we really got to have more fun at Disneyland. Any of us could go to the ocean. But I went on beyond that. You mentioned my MBA. I got it 30 years after I got my diploma from college.
Okay.
It was a Christian university. I sought that out. I mean, we're seeing a lot of, it's all about personal branding. It's all about what's in it for me. It's all about my contract needs. I saw today a baseball pitcher turn down $21 million for 1 season. Hey, he may be worth 25. I'm not in that market. But it's just, we seem to be in the period of time it's about me.
Yeah.
And I think that the world needs a little more love right now, a little more giving, a little more understanding. And so I've changed as I've gotten older, and I've seen some wisdom come about that sometimes it's really more about giving. It's really more about making things happen for other people. And that's why I've moved on to so many different projects.
Yeah.
Because I kind of conquer one and I get bored and I move on to something else. And that's why my books have nothing to do with the next one.
It's crazy. I mean, speaking of moving on to projects, like you said, up until 2017, you're a managing partner in multiple companies, but in that year, life came to an abrupt halt. Share with us how an accident in California provided you with that downtime to find your next chapter as an author.
That's a great question. After 15 years in the prior company on the startup, where I actually got to visit the Pentagon on multiple occasions, because of our technology was very secret in some ways. And as I say, when I got put in the timeout, and I could walk, but I couldn't go for a walk.
Yeah.
You start to reevaluate, and you say, am I going to have a pity party, or am I going to get up and make this good? And I started thinking about Afghanistan. I started thinking about veterans who came home without a leg. And I thought, you have no right to pity yourself on any level. I mean, you can walk, not very well, but I'm actually legally disabled. But I found that I started realizing how much richer my life was when I lost it all in that sense. And of course, I didn't earn income for 3 or 4 years because I was focused on learning how to walk. And when you're writing a book for 2 or 3 years, you're not earning income. You're just there. So I knew this was going to be a long-term event. It's taken me 5 years now to walk. I actually went on a 2-mile walk today. And that's from being able to walk 20 feet.
I mean, I would have to say that your idea of downtime is quite productive. I mean, compared to other folks that I've sat down with, you've authored 5 books. You've earned an MBA with distinction from Grand Canyon University. This was really all done during your recovery years. What is the internal driver that you say motivates you, would you say?
I came from the failure's not an option camp. Every project I've done has had a successful ending. I'm not so sure on my mental health that's been the case, because you can get so involved with something, you forget what's important in life. You know, as I said, I had to reintroduce myself to my son and my daughter. These startups were so taxing on me. You know, I had a $150,000 a month payroll for over 10 years before we had $1 in revenue. And that's when you ask yourself, do you believe? In fact, in my book, Mastering Your Company, I talk about, be careful what you ask for. You want to start a company. Are you willing to lose your wife? Are you willing to lose your house? Are you willing to have your best friends say, I told you so? And so I actually made a 20-question questionnaire in the book. And if you score below 16, I tell you, be a wingman. Yeah. You're probably not a founder, because we're a bunch of people that are disbalanced in some ways. And hopefully through wisdom and success, we get some of that back.
That is very true. I mean, with 2023 almost in the rearview mirror, how did your latest book, Extraterrestrial Existence, what do we really know? How did that come about? And we're talking about an entirely different theme than anything you've done before.
You're going to laugh at this, because this will confirm that I'm probably leaning toward type A. I've actually written another book that we haven't discussed about. It's called Mastering AI in the Metaverse. And if you're going to put the term master on a book, you better do your homework.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you should name it something else. When I started writing Mastering AI and the Metaverse, the reason I was writing it is because I had also written a spy novel that's based on the future. It's about a group of wonder kids and an entrepreneur that build a software algorithm, and it trades stocks. And it ends up making billions of dollars using AI and a couple of other things that are special to the book. As I got halfway through the book, I realized I couldn't finish the book because I didn't have enough knowledge about the technology that hadn't been invented that needs to be in the book. So I thought, in order for me to finish this novel, I need to do a deep dive on AI and the metaverse. At the time, the metaverse was sort of leading the headlines. Yeah. Now it's back to AI. That's why both. As I started going through that book, I realized that even though the planet's been here 4 billion years, in 75 to 100 years, we're going to be out of about a third of the elements on the periodic table. Which means life as we know it, as it's sustained right now, is not going to work. And that's why I started thinking about spaceships, because of the need to go to the moon. Remember, I'm now 3 books down from what I'm trying to finish. And as I started getting into that, I started looking into black hole theory and wormholes. And I'm not an expert in these areas by any means. A little knowledge is a very dangerous thing, is what I learned from my father. But I did start to think about how we're going to travel in the future. This is why the government's already signed several contracts to mine the moon. We're already developing technology to mine asteroids. SpaceX is already there, NASA's already there, Blue Origin's there, Galactic's there. They're all going to be and have programs in progress to start pulling out some of these elements that are not going to come from Earth, because we're running out of them. And so that's what led me with a void. It started out finishing my spy novel, then it got back to AI in the metaverse, but then in that I made my own chart of all 115 of the elements that are on there. They're actually more than that now, because we find new ones all the time. But those are critical to space travel. Yeah. And I thought, so I started after 20 years of watching documentaries and really, frankly, not believing in UFOs, because I would need to interview them like you're doing to me. Yep. And then if the alien's sitting there, then I'm down, put me down. So that's kind of where I came from. But I noticed the Pew Research studies that have come out since 1940, we've seen our population go up about 10% a year on the percentage of Americans who believe in extraterrestrial life. Okay. Now that's loosely defined. That doesn't mean you've talked to an alien, but it might mean that they confirm that UFO that we just got on film on TikTok, the TikTok video from David Grush, that those are actually real. And the government has downplayed through Project Blue Book all the way from the 1930s, all the way up to Trump's Space Force. I started thinking intellectually, how would you write this book? And what I got down to was, we have 3 or 4 categories of knowledge as Americans where we can put our hat on or not put it on whether extraterrestrial life exists. That would start with going back to the pyramids. We've now known from DNA sampling that the planet was populated 20,000 years ago, not 10 to 12,000 years ago. And a lot of them came across the land bridge when there was no water there through a dry period, and came down and migrated down through Alaska down into Canada, as well as came up from canoes. A lot of aliens on their walls have carved alien figures all around the world. And I started thinking, this is on all continents. In fact, what's going on in Antarctica is amazing from new sonar technology, but we'll get off that. And I started thinking, okay, I could probably write a book about ancient tribes and why they behaved the way they did and why they seemingly built things like the pyramids that the math just doesn't add up. And then I thought, but there's been books written on that. I'm not sure I'm going to get my audience there. So, but I need to look at it. And then I evolved from there into technology. And I started looking at technology. And I started saying, well, you assume in the United States that the president knows everything. I've met 4 U.S. presidents and had conversations with them. It's a bizarre situation on how that happened. The only one that I was able to interview about UFOs was President Reagan.
Interesting.
And that's basically because I snuck in an elevator in Century City in this building. I just ran in. You know that guy that's always the last guy in?
Yeah.
I had no idea who was in there. It was President Reagan and 3 servicemen. I happened to know who his neighbor was before he got famous and became governor. And I referenced the neighbor, and he just broke out in a smile. Apparently, as a president, you're pretty darn busy. He had a little time that afternoon and invited me, into the chagrin of the 3 servicemen, into his office. And I took advantage of asking him that question. But anyway, back to the book. I started thinking about the importance of trying to figure out who knew what. And I went back all the way to 1901. And I was able to get records, some of which you're not supposed to have, most of which you can have if you know how to surf the dark web and you know people. And basically if you just work your tail off. Okay. And I started plotting out every president since FDR. I kind of skipped from 1901 to Theodore, who became president, when there was a UFO story about a UFO that was above his house for 2.5 hours. And you go, well, somebody had to see that if it's there for 2.5 hours. The problem is it's been so long, it's just not fresh. No one's going to buy it. So whether I believe it or not, I don't know. I wasn't there. It's just not enough. So I said, I've got to go further. Where can I deep dive here? So it really started opening up with FDR. And if you follow the history of the presidents, communications with aliens is all over the place. But you got to boil all that out, and you got to get down to the skinny of it. And there were 3 presidents that had pretty close contact according to their records and according to first-hand accounts. And then I went back and I started looking at these crashes, because now we're at first-hand information. There's actually a spaceship there or weather balloon. It's one of the 2. But when the government said, we've recovered a spacecraft in the first 24 hours of the crash, we've captured a spacecraft and recovered it, I thought, why would you use the word capture? You didn't capture anything. It just crashed at 1,200 miles an hour into the ground. That's hardly capturing it.
Yeah.
But it just started to set off one small clue that didn't sit with me. And I went back and I researched all the records, and I noticed the 48-hour turnaround the government did on it. And I noticed all the pictures from the alleged weather balloon. And I'll still use the word alleged UFO because it was a very difficult decision to arrive at. But I got over 6 people who were there or saw something or didn't see something. And I was able to take that information, and it was like a treasure hunt. I just got more interested. And as I went through each president, the facts and dynamics of how they made military decisions, how we may or may not have reverse engineered stuff. A lot of stuff came from U.S. scientists who are very smart, and a lot of engineers who are very smart, and astrophysicists. So it became a very interesting web that I had to untangle before I could write the book.
I mean, your search for this answer, talk about a deep dive. From FDR forward, you really got into it. But in life, you basically believe that not the answer, but the journey is really where it's at. I mean, you kind of put a lot on the line by putting this book out there. We're talking about a guy who is into facts, into data, into all these things, and now he's going into somewhere that, quite honestly, people might look at and say this is kind of a risky venture, if you will. How do you feel about that?
Well, we're going to find out. I sell my economic report for $1,000. I used to give it away for free because that's how you build an audience and it's how you build trust. And I can't go back and undo what I said in 22 about 23.
Yeah.
Or about 21, about 22, about what I'm about to say about 23 for 24. Those are hard facts. And it turns out my accuracy rate's about 90% on what I predicted will happen. And so yes, I'm very proud of that, and it took a lot of effort to write that report and be comfortable putting my name on it. This one is not really my target market. I'm not really sure who is the target.
We're going to find out.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, but if 3 out of 4 Americans believe that there is UFO activity going on, I have to go back, and the classic case is the government, if they go left, they're probably going right.
Okay.
And if they tell you they're going right, they're probably going left. Probably some of the most interesting things to unwind are the fact that if they tell you go down this road, and you think it's the other one, you're going to learn more about going down the other road. And
the road less traveled,
yes,
right?
yes.
I mean, just like I tell my kids, they've asked me about this, and I tell them, well, all I can tell you about my belief on that is where there's smoke, there's fire. And there's a lot of smoke, and you got to look at things like that. I mean, be it a white paper, a report, or a book, you stay true to yourself, and you pay attention to what the facts are suggesting. You're not afraid to make projections off your data. When most say this is kind of risky to even do that, and yet, like you say, has much come to pass off those projections.
I think so. Another great question, Gary. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm an entrepreneur. Entrepreneur are about risk. But when you talk about it from a high intellect point of view, it's about measured risk. It's about comprehending the downside. It's about calculating the cost of being wrong versus the win on if you take the chance. And it's about how to take that chance. So I took the exact same approach with the book because I didn't want to write a book at the end of the book and say, no, aliens don't exist, or yes, alien life is among us, by taking the middle road. It's either one or the other.
Okay.
So I give my answer at the end of the book, and I'm a skeptic.
By nature.
So it wasn't any one pieces of evidence or not evidence that was good enough for me. I just had to keep digging and looking at different ways to look at this. And I also did a lot of background work on the IMC, the Industrial Military Complex, which is a clandestine group of people that, of course, don't exist. And yet they spend $50 billion a year of taxpayer money, and nobody knows where it goes. And they fail every audit every year. And if Congress or the Senate asks where they are, there's no answer. In the recent congressional hearings, 3 different people came forward and testified about their belief and their vision and their witnessing UFO activity. All 3 said that they had encountered. The next 3 to 6 that were scheduled to testify, they all canceled.
Interesting. I mean, as 2024 approaches, you're going to launch your first spy thriller, really. Like I said, about an AI program that makes 4 students a pile of money as they work for the machines. Before we let you go, tell me the initial reading of either one of the books here that you've produced here in the past year. Has anybody read them? And what has been the feedback of some of those initial readings?
It's a great question. The AI and Metaverse book is not complete because in the year that I finished the first draft, I stopped writing it because I took on the UFO project. I bumped it ahead of it. Now the book is so outdated, I have to write it over. So the 24 release of my spy novel is now 25 or 26.
Okay.
And the Metaverse book, I can rewrite it in about a year because I basically looked at things logically. There are 16 different levels of technology in the AI stack. So being, a type A, naturally I started out with the chips.
Okay.
And then I thought, no, it's really not about the chips as a starting point. It's about the machines that make the chips. There's only one machine in the world that can make 6th generation computer chips. Only one. There's one company in the world that makes them. So if you want the most advanced next generation chip, you have to go from this company. Yes, they're back ordered. And they're from a very small country in Europe. Amazingly. This machine is now up to $600 million for one machine.
One machine, but like you say, that's where it all starts.
It has
16 points of AI. That's really the machine that creates that, if you will. John, you're an innovator with a career of creating significant shareholder wealth across multiple industries. You've managed, built, or financed multiple companies. Through it all, you believe in kindness, giving back, but you also are not afraid to speak up and commit your wisdom to paper. Is this rewarding work for you?
It's very rewarding work for me because once it's done and once it's out there, you have to live on who you are. And there's a way to say things and do things and still be kind and still be intellectual. And sometimes you're wrong. I was wrong on two indices last year on 9 predictions. I was wrong on 2. The Dow missed by about 12% of where I called the low. I missed it by 12%. You got to own it. I missed it. I missed the interest rate by about 25 to 50 basis points, depending on what happens in December. Last year I nailed it. So you own it. I also realize that I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself by defining things in very narrow ranges. And that's what happens when you get too confident.
Sure.
Now I've learned I need to back off a little bit and just give a little bit of wobbly room, because in any given day, our entire world could change. From a natural disaster to a war, we're in a different time for sure.
Definitely so. As you dig deep, you enjoy sharing your information out there with folks. I thought it was going to be great to sit down with you, and it definitely is. Viewers, let's take a look at the bottom of the screen right there. What you're going to see is their website. On the website, you can learn more about the services that his company provides. You can also find his books right there on the site. Follow him on LinkedIn, as I do. You can really keep up to his current writings and what he's working on recently. Once again, that is Botdorf Research, where detail meets depth. They uncover what others miss. This is Gary Atencio with CNTV. And if you don't know, now you know.